during the training is our school outreach approach. So the model that we're kind of implementing here in Michigan, Mike Gillette on the call is our Michigan State Director. And we're trying to emulate our outreach model so that we can reach more kids in more states and areas across the country. But part of that is just introducing people during this training to what that approach is, the templated communications that we use. And then we'll give you a general overview of the curriculum, the evidence base behind it, and how it's being utilized in schools. We always highlight the story of a bereaved parent or family member during our presentations. We think that's really important for kids to see how this is impacting real Americans in their communities and across the nation, so that they can put a face to the problem and hopefully make healthier decisions because of it. So I will share my screen to open up the first presentation window so that Mike can go ahead and get started. I'm actually gonna change it to PowerPoint mode so it's easier for, let me see if I can get over here. Share window.
So just to set it up, I've been recruiting for about 2 years, and I have a sales background. I was a new account salesman, so I spent my professional life calling people and trying to convince them to meet with me. So this was right up my alley. It's going to be the concept is good, but the structure of school systems may differ from state to state. So that's something you're going to discover here, when you start recruiting. All right, Jack, ready when you are.
Can you see my screen? Okay.
Yep.
So go ahead and get started, and I'll advance it for you. Put myself on mute.
All right. Go ahead and move forward. Next one. Okay, so in Michigan, and again, this could differ from state to state, we have pretty much a tiered approach to school districts. We have a local or intermediate school district. We have a county school district, and then that all flows down to the individual high schools and the principals who ultimately are going to make the decision on whether or not we're going to present. Go ahead. So we've got 56 county ISDs. So I live in Oakland County. Oakland County has their main county ISD. The primary contact for me has always been the superintendent or somebody either in a health curriculum capacity or social worker. So these are the contacts that I would focus on if I decided to reach out to the county. So the idea here is go to the county, meet with the superintendent, sell them on the program, get them to do one of multiple things. Either A, openly support us and send an email out to their local school district saying, hey, you need to look at these guys. Or what we've done in a couple of cases, we've actually convinced the superintendent to allow us to present at one of their monthly district superintendent meetings. So we did that in Macomb County. We went out and we actually met with probably 25 other district superintendents and were able to convey our message on what our program's all about. That's a very effective way. It's also a very difficult thing to do because not all superintendents are going to be willing to extend you that courtesy. But the goal is to use them to get to the individual school districts, which would get you to the schools. Next. So local school districts, again, in Michigan, I live in Oakland County, and in Oakland County we have probably, I'm going to guess, 15 school districts. So it may be the city of Birmingham, and the city of Birmingham may have 2 or 3 high schools. So the next level of contact would be local school districts. So again, it's the same process. Reach out to the superintendent at the local school district. Also try and locate people like a health coordinator or a social worker, because they typically have more time to dedicate to advocating for us, and they understand the scope of the problem. So again, I don't necessarily always start at the county, but you definitely want to reach out at a minimum to the local school districts to get their support. Okay. And just to explain, what happens very often is I will get the superintendent of the local school district to embrace our program. And at a minimum, when I reach out to the principal, I say, hey, I talked to Superintendent Jones, and he fully supports our program. Ideally, I'd like them to reach out to the principals, but again, that's difficult. So in a school, it is the principal or the assistant principal who is going to make the decision on whether we're going to present or not. And what you're dealing with, especially at the principal level, principals are very difficult to get a hold of. They get calls all the time from people wanting things from them, and very often they're not going to reply. So I focus heavily on what I call secondary influencers. So if I make several attempts to reach a principal, don't get to them, then I will look at the assistant principal. I'll ask about a social worker or SROs or health teachers. So again, this is a way to go around the principal, get these people to advocate for you, get these people to go to the principal and say, you need to look at this program, because again, it is that principal who's going to make that final decision. So you're going to find through your recruiting who those secondary influencers are. It may be different people than what we've cited here, but those people are very important to us. Okay. Community coalitions. Again, this is unique. I don't know if this is unique to Michigan, but in Oakland County, we have a main drug coalition, and they manage all of the individual or local school district coalitions. So in a high percentage of the school districts that I'm dealing with, there is a drug coalition that is active in that school. And what these drug coalitions are doing is they're going into the school on a routine basis, maybe going into a health class, maybe setting up a table in a cafeteria. But what they're doing is they're messaging, they're bringing awareness to different health issues, drug-related issues in the school. These people do not do what we do. They're not standing on stage. So I approach these coalitions, introduce myself, here's what we do. Would you be willing to support us? Very often I'll invite them to a presentation maybe at another district or someplace where we're presenting so they can see it. So if you can partner with these people, they can do a couple things. They can help you get to the right people in the high school. They could actually advocate for you as well. So these are groups that could be very helpful to you. And the way to find them is just go into, let's say, a city or a county. So I'd go Oakland County Drug Coalition. If there's a main coalition, they'll give it to me. If not, it may list multiple drug coalitions. The other thing I do is I'm working in the city of Birmingham. If I'm working with that school district, I will Google Birmingham Drug Coalitions, and then they will be presented to me. So, and I keep a list of these, and I contact them and keep record of those contacts. Okay, next. Okay, find your potential customer, the process. And I got to look at this. So the process is very important, but it may be different from school to school. We are looking right now at obtaining lists of high schools that have contacts, and if we get those, we can cut out a lot of that initial work that you have to do. Right now, what I've done is I've gone to a website where I can get a list of schools. I've entered each school into the database, and then I'll enter the contact. It's very time consuming, but it's been the only way we have. So you see this www.greatschools.org. That is a website that you can go to. You can click on high schools. You can enter a city or a county or a state, and it will present high school information to you. So these are steps we're going to talk about. But so I will initially find out who the contacts are through this website. I'll enter them in the system. Once I have that, I will start reaching out to the principals, and that could be via telephone, call the school. I want to talk to the principal. It could be via email, but typically it's both, and the goal is to schedule a date to do a presentation. This is the overall suggested process at a high level. Go. Okay, so when I first started 2 years ago, I was tracking everything on a spreadsheet, and it is a somewhat effective way, but it is very difficult process because you're just entering data into a spreadsheet, you're logging your communications with them, but you have no way that I'm aware of in a spreadsheet to have it notify you with tasks. So for instance, if I call Birmingham Seaholm School and I leave a message with the principal or I talk to the principal, I can log my notes into a spreadsheet, but what I don't have is the ability for that spreadsheet to tell me 2 weeks later to reach out to that principal again. This is an example of a call log where you would, put whatever information that you want. It's a nice way to start, but it's not an effective way to really grow your base. So we'll talk about a CRM as an example, okay? Okay, CRM, customer relation management software. Salesforce is probably the most well-known. We use a product called Bloomerang, and what I do with Bloomerang is I enter the schools into the database. I enter the contacts associated with those schools. So what you see on the left is the actual school listing itself, the school, the address, the telephone number. If I relationship tabs, it shows me my contacts. So there's a principal, there's a counselor, and there's a secretary. So behind each of those is a telephone number, contact information, email, and then what is critical is logging calls and logging tasks. So every time I reach out to a school, I will go in to the notes. I will add a note, which is a description of what we talked about, what the next step is. In many cases, it's something as simple as I voicemailed and emailed the principal. But I have this log, and many times the conversation I have with the principal will be things like they're interested, they want me to call back in 2 months to go ahead and schedule. So it's important to have accurate notes in there because that allows you to recontact that person and have an idea of what you've talked about in the past. If you don't enter those calls, you're kind of just dealing in the blind. And then the last thing, if you see at the top, is a blue circle with a square in it. That's a task. So again, if I reach out to a principal or anybody for that matter, and I send them a voicemail or I send them an email, I will have to have a follow-up date. There's always a follow-up date that you have to do something. So a task is that. The task could read something as simple as call Birmingham Seaholm High School, and then I put a date on that, and the day that I set is the task to happen, I'll get an email saying call Birmingham Seaholm High School. So the tasks are very critical because they allow you to stay on top of the institutions that you're talking to. And I could be talking with 100 schools at any given time. And if I don't have accurate notes, if I don't have accurate tasks, then it's all going to fall apart. So knowing the process, staying loyal to the process is crucial. If you skip any, I had somebody reach out to me a month ago about a presentation, and I had not entered notes when I last talked to them, and I was embarrassed because I forgot about the presentation and had to scramble to get everybody together to do it. So it's very critical to follow this process. And what we can do is, if your intent is to recruit, we can give you access to Bloomerang, and I'm going to create, hopefully in the next couple of days, a video which walks you through how to use Bloomerang. so you can review that over and over again until you're comfortable with it. Okay, there's free CRMs out there. I've used HubSpot, I've used Bloomerang, I've used Salesforce. They all basically do the same thing with different features and different complexities. So we're going to be using Bloomerang. Next. Okay, so when I reach out to a school, if we get to a point where they're willing to set up a presentation, I will tell them that we would like to start no sooner than whatever. And what I'm telling people is 9:30. And the reason I'm telling people 9:30 is because we get there an hour before, which will be 8:30. And sometimes we have to travel as much as an hour to get there. So I don't want to put presenters in a position where they have to get up at 6 in the morning and drive an hour to get to a school prior to a presentation. So you need to determine, when you're talking to them, let's do something from 9, no earlier than 9 or 9:30. You're going to make that decision. And then you're going to set a date. The next thing you have to do, and this is critical, you have to send an email that we'll provide you. I call it a setup email, and it basically says we're going to arrive an hour early. We're going to put a thumb drive in your computer. Your computer needs to have PowerPoint on it. We're going to need to be able to project on a screen. We'll need audio because we're showing a movie, and we're going to need microphones because we're going to be standing on stage. So I send that out the day they book, and I typically send it out a week before we arrive, just as a reminder. What you don't want to do is show up and not have them ready, and then you got 500 students walk in the auditorium, and you're just staring at them. So that's critical, and we've been fortunate enough to where I don't think we've had an incident, maybe one, where they were not ready for us, but we adapt. I also will, on a routine basis, ask them, where should we park and where do we enter? If you go to a high school, there's multiple entrances. There could be multiple parking lots. You could spend a lot of time driving around trying to figure it out, and then end up calling the school as you're sitting in their parking lot. I try to get that up front so that we have all that covered. And then when I send emails to presenters saying we've got these presentations next week, I will include that information. And then I mentioned email with all, prior, a couple days prior, just to confirm they're ready for us. We actually had a situation where we showed up the day of a presentation. I did not send the email 2 days prior, and the principal looked at us and said, "Why are you here?" So, sometimes that happens. Okay, so I talked a bit about communications. I have created a group of email templates that I use as part of my recruiting effort. And those are constantly changing. But the reason behind that is I want to be able to streamline the process. Talk to a school, this is the email I want to send, cut and paste, send it, boom, move on. That way you're not recreating and writing emails every time you want to do it. So we have a set of emails that we can give you. I will tell you they're too long. I've probably modified them since I gave them to Jack, but use those as an example, modify them to reflect what you think is best. Short is really the key. Principals will not read lengthy emails, and mine are always too lengthy. The other thing is we create a sheet that we can provide to the schools, which really is a bio on us as an individual. So this talks about, my background, what I do for Fentanyl Fathers, has a picture of me, and I send this typically with my initial email. Here's who I am, and this is what we're doing. Capture your attention, a short bio, 35% of it. Okay, next. Recommendations for email. The key here is always call to action. I will put in bold print towards the end of my email, will you give me 10 minutes or will you give me 15 minutes of your time? That's the ask. I've got to get that on the table, and it is typically in bold print on every email that I send to the principal. Next. Here's an introductory email. This is an old one, and it is way too long. It has a link. I'm not sure what the link is. That's our website. But I would use this only as an example. The key to an introductory email is make it short as possible. I always start by saying, we lose X number of people to fentanyl poisoning in this country every year, and then I'll put in bold print, I lost my son in 2022. That will get their attention, and I always include that. And then you just go on. Again, you don't want to, this is so lengthy. I'm giving you the opportunity to change. Okay, this isn't too bad, but you want to communicate to them very quickly what we do, and then again, go back to, can you give me 15 minutes of your time? This is an old one. It doesn't have that 15-minute in there, but that's all my current ones do. And I'm citing an article here, which is one of many articles that I may cite. Sometimes I cite a newspaper article that a local newspaper did that covers a presentation we had made in a high school, so they can read that. Sometimes I'll include an impactful article that a student wrote for their newspaper, or a letter that we got from a student. And I always include a couple of reference letters from high schools, and typically high schools in their district or close to their district, because these letters can be very helpful in getting them to call you back, because this is a reference from another school close to them. So this is an example. I would say modify this, shorten it to what you think makes sense. I think you understand the message that we're trying to get to them. And you'll see one thing in here where at the top where I do note that the age group that is among the fastest growing group to be killed by fentanyl is the 14 to 19-year-old group of people. That's their students, and I say that at every presentation. But that gets their attention. This is not something that your kids aren't going to see. They're definitely going to see this cross their path. Okay, next. Okay, this is that presentation setup email. So in there you'll, I'm sorry, no, that is not this. Okay, I'm sorry. So first step, emails, voicemails, get their attention, get them to at least call you. Once they call you, you talk about your program, and then you want to give them an opportunity to view the content of the program. And this is critical, because I always say I'm not going to step foot on stage until a principal has vetted our program and is comfortable with everything that we're going to say, because I don't want any surprises. So this email gives them a link. I tell them to click on the blue presentation detail tab there, and it will give them access to all the content of our presentation. So there's actually a video of an entire presentation they can watch. I don't expect them to, but I put it in front of them. They can look at the slide deck that we're going to show their students, and we've had a couple of schools come back and ask us to change things. They can view the movie we're going to show. We talk about the fact that we do a student survey. We utilize this to measure the impact we're having on the students and potentially modify. So I make sure they understand we have a survey, allow them to view the survey. We explain to them that we take the surveys on a quarterly basis, we mine the data, and we record a summary report. This is huge. Very few organizations do that. The fact that we're measuring the impact, the fact that we're summarizing this, is a very unique thing and a very important feature, and we want to make sure they know we do that. And then the last thing I point out to them is when you're on this presentation detail page, go to the reference letters at the bottom. There's going to be dozens of reference letters that they can review to see what other schools are saying. Okay, next. Okay, so here's an example of the landing page for Michigan. If you look in the lower left, they can click on that to watch the movie Dead on Arrival. Behind that is a full-length live assembly. This is an assembly that we did in January of 2025, I believe. So they can view the whole presentation if they want to do so. The slide deck, the PowerPoint slide deck is there. They can click on that, download it, and review it. And then again, survey information. They can view the most recent quarterly analysis, and then as many school reference letters that they want to click on and read. So it basically, by going to this page, it lays everything out in front of them that they need to know in order to understand what we're going to do on stage. Next. Okay, here's the setup email. We'll write, and again, I send this immediately, and then I'll set a task to send it either a week before, or typically it's a week before. So we're going to arrive approximately an hour before the presentation to do setup. We do this so we don't have any surprises that we have to deal with. I talk about we're going to put a thumb drive in their computer. They need to have PowerPoint. We need to be able to display on some type of a screen and have audio capabilities, and we're going to need microphones. So I send this, and typically they'll say understood, or on a rare occasion they'll come back and say we don't have one of these components and we have to adjust. Next. And then there's the letter that I send at the end, and again, this has changed. I apologize. I keep telling Jack I'm going to get him new ones, but I don't. We always want to thank the schools. It's critical that we thank them, that we compliment their students, how attentive and polite they were, and then we, again, go back to having an ask. And I ask for feedback, not that they're going to give us any, but it's just a polite thing to do. And then I focus on a letter of recommendation. We need this letter of recommendation. And I will tell the principal on stage when we're after the presentation, I'm going to ask you for that letter. I really need that. Please help out. And then they see it when I send this email to them, so it's a reminder. We also talk about the fact here, the third bullet is we're an underfunded nonprofit. So if there's any way you have the ability to donate money to us, you have the ability to pay us for this, it would be greatly appreciated. And we do get that from some schools. We're kind of changing our tack now. When I originally signed up a school, they always ask, what do you charge? And for the last 2 years, I've said it's free, but we accept donations. I lean a little, I don't like to say it's free. I will approach them and say, we're looking for donations from the schools because we're an underfunded nonprofit, blah, blah, blah. And then I'll recommend a number. How much? Well, maybe $1,000. And I term it as a donation. In some occasions, they'll just say flat out, we don't have the budget. Or they'll say, yes, I think we can do something. If they don't have the budget, we don't want to deny them, but we want to lead with the fact that we potentially need funding to continue this program, and if you could donate, that'd be wonderful. Okay, next. So here's an example of a success story within one of the counties a couple years ago. Again, I'm reaching out to the county district. I'm reaching out to the high school. I'm not getting a lot of traction in the high school. I'm not getting return calls. I'm not getting a tremendous amount of attention from the district superintendent. So I went to the SRO, and the SRO for that county said, hey, Mike, come on in. We have these SRO meetings, either in person or Zoom. I want you to come in and present at the next one. So this was Lapeer County. I went to the county offices. I presented to all the SROs, give them an overview of our program. That led to a Zoom meeting with all of the district superintendents. So all the school districts, the superintendents have weekly or monthly or bi-monthly calls. They let me come into one of those and present to them. As a result of this, we were able to book every high school in that district, including middle schools. And that happened within literally within 3 months after we started this process. Reached over 3,000 high school students and middle schools, and got some very good contacts and good reference letters. And I'll cite another. We have a county here in Michigan that I've been unsuccessful in getting into. They pretty much blocked me at the district and the county level. Greg was able to get the ear of one of the councilmen in one of the cities. That led to the county superintendent inviting us to present to their districts. It was an in-person meeting, and as a result, we are now booking assemblies in that county. And the county superintendent and the district superintendents actually reached out to the schools in some shape or manner, reinforcing what we do. So these are both solid success stories. Not always going to happen this way. I will be honest with you. Probably 75% of my time is chasing a high school principal and or assistant principal. So that's just something you got to deal with. Okay, next. Okay, I will tell you that if you're not thick-skinned, if you're not willing to be rejected constantly and go back into the weeds and find other avenues, persistence is key. If this is not something that you're comfortable with, then it's going to be difficult for you. I've got 40-some years in sales, cold calling, so this was right up my alley. Number 2 is organization. We talked about tracking phone calls. We talked about tracking communications and what you're doing. That is important. Without that organization, without task setting, you're not going to be successful because things are going to fall through the cracks. You're not going to go back after schools and have any follow-ups. School principal. Okay, so we know the school principal is the primary one here. We talked about SROs. I want to talk about advocates. Advocates are very important to you. We talked about that. If you're not getting a hold of the principal, go to the social worker, go to the health teacher. These people will pick up their phone, they will answer an email, they understand the scope of the problem, and they will give you time to discuss the program. Once you discuss the program, they're hooked. They're going to run lead for you, and we have gotten into many schools because of these individuals. But let me tell you another thing. This is important. Every time I call a school to in that initial contact to talk to the principal, I know I'm not going to get the principal. So I will either get the principal's secretary or I'll have the receptionist on the line. On that initial call, I always introduce myself to the receptionist. I always tell that individual what our mission is, how crucial this fentanyl poisoning issue is in this country. And what I'm doing is I'm appealing to them as a human being. And 9 times out of 10, they will say, this is wonderful. We have to look at that. We have to look at this. And then the next time I call, they recognize me. And I'll say, look, I'm having a problem getting a hold of the principal. Can you give him a handwritten note to call me? Can you advocate for me? Or many times I'll say, who else should I be talking to? I understand the principal's busy. You know my mission. Who else should I talk to? And very often they'll say, you should talk to the health teacher. You should talk. So I will get these names. I'll get emails of these people. I'll put them into Bloomerang, and these people become my focus as well. So developing advocates is critical. You're going to find out who are the right people through experience, but that's very important. As far as getting school information, sometimes you go to a website, you can locate the principal by going into the search bar and entering principal. What you're not always going to get is an email. Sometimes it's an internal click on the web page that you can message the principal. You do that, and I do that, but I would typically call the school, talk to the receptionist, get the email of the principal. I'll also use that opportunity, like I said, not only to sell this receptionist on what we do, but I will also at that point ask for the health teacher name and email and the social worker's name and email. You might as well get it all covered right up front, so that's important. Board of Education is worthless. Don't waste your time because they're not going to give you anything. And then be persistent, but not obnoxious. I've been guilty of being obnoxious when somebody tells me no because I don't take no well. The other things here real quick is when you get to the school, you're going to want to ask them what the racial makeup is because we have 2 versions, a diverse version of fentanyl father. We want to make sure that we are showing the right one to them. And the other thing I do is if I'm focusing on a county, I will go to the medical examiner for that county, and I will ask them to provide me with the county list of fentanyl deaths. And sometimes they'll just give me a list that says we lost 120 people, but I ask them to give me that in a Excel format that lists the city that each person lived in. That way I can filter by city. When I'm talking to the city of Birmingham, I can say you had 10 deaths from fentanyl in your community last year, so this is a reality. So that's just another thing you might want to focus on. And I do that early on in my recruiting efforts. So
Mike, you froze, I think.
No, I'm here.
Oh.
Had to go communicate something to my wife real quick as Michael was presenting. Very good job, by the way. And I do have some questions and comments. And these are just suggestions. Michael, I mean, I've heard Bob brag about you, Greg. I mean, you're a pro of the patios here. I mean, you really know how to get in. And I think God's really blessed you. I like your method. My first question is, if you were able to get directly to the principal, how much time would that shave off of your whole process? Because obviously, the other parts are, take a look at the content, make sure you're okay with it. We're coming on this day, need this equipment, but how much weight is that first part, just getting to superintendent, the principal?
Well,
I think that Michael's camera froze, but I can say that sometimes the principal is harder than the assistant principal or the social worker to get a hold of. A lot of times when we make face-to-face contact with these principals, maybe doing one of their monthly meetings or being invited in, it's a lot easier to sustain contact with them. Calling their office, I think, is another kind of quick way in, but the assistant principal a lot of times is like the director of student services too. So sometimes they determine what is going to.
I'm sorry, I got bumped off both audio and video, so I'm back. I'm sorry. What was the question?
Yeah, so Michael, the question was, when you look at each segment of the process on the front end of just getting a hold of the superintendent and then getting a hold of those principals, how much time is allocated just for that one function? Is that half the time just to get all that, through the pipeline?
Entering data or actually reaching out?
Yeah, reaching out and getting confirmation that yes, we would like to have you guys come in and host an event.
From the first initial contact, I may get in touch with the principal within a week, but I will tell you I have many schools that I booked that the process has been weeks, if not months, because again, you have to, the hardest thing is to get someone's attention. Once you get their attention, you have to sell them on it, and then they're going to have to, find a date. It could be months. This could be a very lengthy process. There are occasions where it happens very quick.
I will say too that, this is kind of the cold calling approach where we don't have a relationship maybe established with the school already. Schools that we do have established relationships with, I think the process moves quicker. And then schools, if you have a school that you think would be interested in bringing in this presentation, or someone in education, they can put in a booking request in our website at just fentanylfathers.org/schedule. And it takes them to a Google form. It allows us to know kind of the audio visual capabilities of the school. And then I follow up with them directly. Usually I just use the presentation setup email that Mike referenced during the presentation to confirm the booking date that they request on the form. And then we arrange speakers and, kind of logistics to make it happen. But that's a easy kind of organic way of getting school bookings. What this outreach is if you have a specific area that we really want to tackle the district or tackle the state on how we kind of do it. And now we're trying to make that process even simpler. So in specific areas, I'm just inputting school data with principal information right into our database so that it can be pulled for different states. So I just finished inputting all the high schools for Queens South. I'm going to move on to Brooklyn and then Staten Island, kind of for our New York contingent. And I found all that information just on the district's website. I had to kind of track down the principal email, but they usually have staff directories that have a bunch of different positions listed that you can try for contacting too.
Gotcha. Okay. The reason I asked that question, and here are some some suggestions, recommendations, and you may have tried this, or maybe you haven't yet, but Christian radio stations are required to do public service announcements to basically allow people to provide information to the community. And it's called a PSA. And so there's no charge for this. And since you all are not selling anything, you could go on Christian radio stations. You could probably, call into the station, because maybe Greg's in Florida, or Jack, you're in, Minnesota, but you're working out of Michigan. And so the area that you want to target, you would target, those radio stations and say, hey, listen, we're coming in with our program. Here's what we're doing. We want to do a PSA. And so the PSA would be, a 4-minute radio spot with the community, letting them know, hey, here's what we're doing in the community. We need your help. Christian brothers and sisters, you may have, your wife may be the principal. You may have children at the school. But, what I'm trying to say here is you have an army of people that love what you're doing, and they may say, hey, I'll pick up the phone. I mean, Randy's my brother. He's the superintendent, or Bob's my neighbor. He's the principal. I'll go talk to Bob. And then, so it's just like you plant the tree and let the roots go out in that community that you get ready to target, and you just kind of cast your net. And then you can set up a conference call so anybody in the community that would like to learn more or to partner, they could come to the conference call. You could have a bridge, maybe 50 people are on or whatever, and say, listen, here's the area that we're coming in. That's why we, did the PSA with, and the radio, you'll know the viewership or the listenership. And then please let us know if you have any area of influence. Here's how you could be a big help. They may even make some calls because they're familiar. I mean, the school's across the street from where they live. Who knows? But I think that would be a huge opportunity to potentially just leverage the people in the community that want to make sure their kids are safe or their grandkids are safe.
That's a great suggestion.
It's a great idea, Mike. Thank you. That's brilliant.
That's a great idea, and Greg, this is right up your alley.
Yeah, I like it. I like it.
And you could even you could have it so dialed in to where when you call in, it's just, hey, Greg, it's just kind of like that you're calling into Ohio or something. So it's kind of tailored for Ohio, that open conversation. But then the core of it is on, it's taped or something where you can hit play, and then it's just the same thing every time in a different market. So it's dialed in,
Right.
Says, hey, here's what we're doing, and the even your the way you speak is just like, man, it's just like compelling. And then that, as that recording stops, then you finish up on the back end. Here's how you can get engaged, or something. Anyway, you wouldn't have as much time. It might even be something to be pre-recorded,
Right.
But otherwise it could be live. And so
Sure.
I think it would just be worth doing a little pilot to see. I think you'd have huge results. The other thing is, when I was out in LA, some of these high schools, this one I went to over in Downey, California. I mean, the lead singer of Metallica graduated from there. They had, this, really famous TV anchor, and it was like a wall of celebrities, And so anytime you have a graduate of a school, if you can even get in there or find out, like, are there any celebrities that graduated from this school? Greg, you have so many contacts. If you get a hold of that celebrity that graduated from that high school within your network, And guess what? He's going to call the superintendent, call the board, school board, say, hey, I want this in every school. Guess what? The superintendent's going to tell him, hey, it's going to override the principal. We're doing this, so-and-so called, or a donor, a school donor, that's donated for the football field or whatever. Money talks. And so you guys know everything I'm talking about, but it's real political. And but if you have the right person to call, it could just hit the domino for all the whole school district. And because that could be a black, former NFL football star, and so you're going into Detroit or something like that. But Johnny Smith calls, and okay, we love it, and then you guys just provide your package, so they know, and then you're just lining them up. And this may even facilitate some giving from these celebrities that have a lot of money. They're giving to something, so you give them a good tax write-off, for because you're a nonprofit. I've talked to Greg about Millionaire Man Cave. This organization just started in January, but we have over 700 members in the U.S. so far, and 10 plus from overseas. But even in the MMC chat, and I know leadership would support this because I'm getting to know everybody really well, and they're all about helping the brotherhood. But you could post within that chat, hey, we're going to Boise, Idaho, are there any men in Boise? And people are going to chime in. And then, hey, look, we need to get into the schools. Do you know any principals? So let them go out. So I know the principal because these are business owners.
We're working with the NFL. I like the alumni thing, but for purposes of training on this thing, I just were any questions at Gary Schultz? Did you have any questions, or are you not able to? You're probably not able to talk. Okay, I'm going to. Just if you have a way to have Gary ask any questions, Jack, I'm gonna end this particular section, which is how to get into schools, and the next part is going to be how to.
Yeah, it's gonna be an overview of the presentation that I'll be giving next.
Right.